Alright, let's get started. Hey guys. So, Fire Emblem Three Houses. Yeah. So, before I even begin, and before I mention the multi-parter that I'm just deciding to stick with, I'm going to show you my notes. 1, 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and 7. I mean, yeah, there's a little bit at the top, but, you know, so this is another 7 pages of notes type of thing, so we're probably going to be here for a while. Now, I've split it up into multiple chunks, so instead of coming out with like this big 4-hour video or whatever, I'm instead going to go ahead and talk about it in individual chunks. So I'm going to start with the gameplay, and that's going to be what I label part 1, and I'll basically upload it in 5 videos. Excuse me, I keep screwing that up. In 5 videos, which of course will be, the gameplay, which is this one, then the positioning. I do not know how to do it properly. Okay, there we go. That's better. So, yeah. So, gameplay, White Clouds, which will include Cinder Shadows, by the way, and, whatchamacallit, and then each of the individual routes. I will, of course, be... now, you're probably thinking, well, wait, there are 4 time skip things, Blue Wolf. Yeah, but Silver Snow is going to be lumped in with Crimson Flower just because I can sum up my thoughts on Silver Snow in about 5 minutes. It sucks. But let's go ahead and talk about the history of this game first. Before I mention anything else. First and foremost, let's talk about the fact that this was co-developed by Koei Tecmo. Now, you've all heard the joke. And you've all heard the joke before, right? That, Koei Tecmo, Team Ninja, they're known for, the boobs. And, yeah, there's a decent selection of boobs in this game. But they don't go overblown with the fan service, thankfully. In many ways, during my rant view of Fire Emblem Warriors, which I stand behind, I hate Fire Emblem Warriors and it can go burn in a fire. Fire Emblem Warriors' biggest problem was the fact that they were developing it and they were basically horny for Fates. Which is funny because this is actually them being horny for Fates, more so in a gameplay sense, more than anything, right? Admittedly, a little bit in the plot department too, but we can get into that more later. But what I do like is that they didn't just they didn't go all the way back to Fates. Like, this is not a carbon copy of Fates. This is almost as if they looked at Fire Emblem Fates and said, from a gameplay perspective, looked at Fire Emblem Fates and said, how can we make this better? How can we make this substantially improved? My note here says it all. Plus 31 was the final gameplay score. Now that's pretty big, because if I flip back a few pages to Valkyria Chronicles, which will take me a minute, give me a second. There we go. Valkyria Chronicles, for reference, was plus 21, which is hilarious because the story score was also plus 34 for Valkyria Chronicles. Which is funny because this one was plus 72. Though, if I can explain myself on that one, that's mostly the cast of characters, okay? The cast of characters is what bolstered that story score. Because it's worthy of note that I am pretty sure Valkyria Chronicles was something like 40 or 50. It was like 40. Yeah, I think it was like something like 40 pluses, and then there was like 10 negatives. Negatives for that story. Fire Emblem Three Houses, on the other hand, was 172 pluses to story and 100 negatives to story. In other words, well, the final score may have been plus 72. This is not a game that I can say is flawless. This is a game that succeeds despite itself, in my opinion. And I know that's going to heckle some people, but, you know, we can save the ranting for when we get to the actual narrative, because that's where all of my problems with this game lie. Is mostly in some of the in some of the maps being terrible, and in and the only gameplay stuff I have is the maps being terrible for the most part. There were so many maps that if I go on my rough notes notebook over here, I can, there were a lot. Some of the end game, I think almost all of the end games got two negative. No, Azure Moon's end game only got one gameplay negative, right? But, there's so many gameplay negatives that I handed out for Paralogs because it was just ridiculous. Ridiculous, But, none of the... I won't bore you with that. The point is that a lot of the maps, especially the Paralogs, got gameplay negatives out of me. Mostly because they just were not fun, they were not engaging, and they were just there. A lot of them relied on, well, to be blunt, a lot of them relied on multiple reinforcements of irritating enemies. My most hated one was actually a DLC paralog, because Anna was made recruitable through the DLC. I'll talk about that later, because Anna's a whole bag of worms, is a whole note in the gameplay section, because, ugh. But Anna's paralog was bad because, well, you basically have a bunch of people whose very weapon class allows them multiple attacks. You see the problem here? You see the problem? But I digress. So yeah, a lot of the gameplay negatives were on the paralogs. If the paralogs were not as bad, this would easily be like plus 40 or plus 50 in terms of gameplay. Now, granted, I could have added some other, gameplay conceits there, and admittedly some story conceits, but again, I'll stick with the plus 72 to story, right? And if I may be so bold, I actually do stand behind this game scoring better than VC1 on the gameplay axis for one simple reason. Despite my issues with the narrative, the actual gameplay itself sings to me. And that's usually what a decently high score like that is. Because, if something scores that well, then yeah, that means there's a lot of merit to it. And again, that plus 72 to story is because of the characters, not so much, the story itself. Because, let me put it to you this way, I love these characters, but I hate this storyline. Which is funny, because I can actually say that about a decent chunk of, well, fiction in general, really. I can say that about Star Wars in some eras. The prequel trilogy specifically. I love a lot of the characters in the prequel trilogy. Anakin when he's not when he's not 10 or joining the dark side and or being boring. All right, Anakin, when in those few scenes where he's awesome. Obi-Wan, Padme, Mace Windu. Granted, Mace Windu is probably mostly because of Samuel L. Jackson, but regardless, I love a lot of that. There are many narratives where I don't like the story, but I like the characters that are involved in that story, right? And that's the interesting thing. There are so many characters in this setting where I wanted to pull them into other settings. By the way, the gameplay structure of this, this is how you do a Shin Megami Tensei crossover over with Fire Emblem. Not that Tokyo Mirage Sessions nonsense. Ugh. Which is funny because that's actually my third note is the calendar system, which is why I say that, right? Because the calendar system is how that operates. Which is funny because this is actually more you have more liberty to do stuff with this than you do in Persona, in my opinion, or at least it feels more like that. But we should talk about Divine Pulse. Let's talk about Divine Pulse. AKA, let's talk about rewind mechanics in Fire Emblem. Yes, I am one of those people who says that rewind mechanics need to continue to come back in all future installments of the franchise going forward. Even if you just want to make it a simple conceit of, this is insert divine entity's charm here, and then it allows you to rewind, but you never bring it up in the story, like Echoes did, which arguably would be better, by the way. Because again, that allows you to have it just be, it only works when it wants to, which is still a contrivance and would probably still make a certain death not work. But again, the problem was they put it into a CG cutscene in the beginning, which is what causes the plot hole. Like, if it was just the, I will, I can turn back the hands of time for you in like in a battle cutscene, then I would have been like, okay, that's fine, right? Because in lore, you're not really felling, the demonic beasts, demonic beasts twice or even thrice, right? You're not actually beating them to the ground, in lore multiple times. You're just cutting them down. The pre-time skip cutscene in Everything But Crimson Flower proved that point perfectly, But yeah, no, the Divine Pulse where you just activate it and you can rewind your turns, brilliant stuff from a gameplay perspective. It's got its story issues, but we can get into its story issues when we start actually talking about the narrative. So there you go. I like it. It was a good system. So we have crests, which are basically skills, which is funny because there are actual skills in this one, which are which we have passive skills, which are abilities, and then you have combat skills, which are more about which are actually combat arts. They're called combat arts. You spend some of your weapon durability and you do a powerful attack, which I like for the record. It's actually a nice risk-reward system with the weapons. Also, another nice touch is I like that you're not absent. Your character doesn't have a weapon; it's just a sitting duck. If their weapon breaks, it's actually one of the things that it's the one change. It's the one way to use weapon durability properly, in my opinion. The weapon is infinitely more useful if it has durability, but when it's got no durability, it is weaker and it is less accurate. I'm okay with that. So I guess that, which is funny because I guess that means I've already talked about the weapon durability. Did I even have a note about weapon durability, or was I like, I'm gonna know what I'm gonna know what I want to talk about with that. Oh wow, I really didn't. So yeah. Hey, I remembered to talk about it. Cool. Another thing I like about the gameplay is um, magic is you have a limited number of uses per battle. I like that. I really do. Because it effectively means that that a mage can only fling so many spells per turn. And of course, the magic classes will increase and enhance how many times that is. Because certain magic classes actually enhance the base spell. Hell, uh, fire for a normal mage, and miasma. Is it miasma? Yeah, miasma for dark mages, and will basically double the uses, right? Which is a nice touch. And also, if they haven't learned miasma or fire, depending on the class, that skill will give them that tone. Give them not that tone, but that ability. So that's a cool thing. So next we got to talk about all of the stuff you can do in explore mode. The next three notes are, well, four notes, excuse me, are effectively mostly for explore mode. So the first thing here is faculty training / advanced drills. In White Clouds, aka pre-time skip, you effectively can only up your ranks for specific abilities, which I'll talk about in a moment, by uh, being tutored by your fellow professors and other faculty members, which is actually kind of nice. In the post-time skip, if you've actually gotten somebody, somebody's weapon rank is higher than your, ability rank is higher than yours, you can actually have them help you to increase your own. Right? So let's say Lysithea has S rank in Reason, for example, which is the attack magic um, category. Or she can then tutor you to help boost your Reason rank to get you access to more to more spells and stuff. It's actually a nice touch. Then there's then there's the monastery activities, including the dining hall, cooking, fishing, gardening, and tournaments. There is some evidence to suggest that horse racing was another one that was going to be there. I don't know how that would have worked, admittedly. I don't remember from Gas's video, please forgive me. But at the same time, these are the ones I'll just, like I said in the Sky one video, I only look things up if I'm actually curious about it from a behind the scenes perspective. Because again, most of my discussions are meant for the in-universe idea. I'm sure I'll discuss the background if it interests me, like, Koei Tecmo co-developing this game. But otherwise, yeah, no, I'm hands off with a lot of it. It's also why I've decided against talking about the recast of Male Byleth, by the way, because I have decided it is not worth my time to look up, because from everything I have heard and seen and read, it was apparently because as the original voice actor was an egotistical dink and broke NDAs, from what I can tell. I could be wrong, and frankly, if I'm wrong, I will take the L on that because I don't care. So yeah. So anyways, to get back into it, many of the activities, with the exception of fishing and gardening, actually, require you to use activity points, and these increase as you level up. You're very limited at first, but then as your professor rank goes up, your ability to explore the monastery and conduct different activities also goes up. I didn't write it down, but there's also the sauna from the DLC, which is a whole other thing, which is cool. It's certainly better than the bathhouse was in Fates, because the bathhouse in Fates was literally just see the characters in nothing but a towel. And I don't know, it basically was just like, ugh, you know. But I digress. You know, tournaments are basically the arenas of previous games. The dining hall increases motivation, and like cooking gives you boosts to stats, kind of like how the mess hall was in Fates. Again, there's going to be a lot of Fates comparisons in these videos, because whoo boy does this game take massive amounts of inspiration from Fates. But again, it feels like they took what Fates screwed up on and improved upon it. Credit where it's due. And the and and then there's the dining hall. Share a meal with your students, get their motivation up. So you take two students and you basically dine with them. Now, it's funny because you're like, well, why does it have to be two? Well, let's just say that there could be some nasty implications with that and leave it at that, especially considering you can actually support many of the students. So, there you go. Now, obviously, you have to wait 5 years because that's why the time skip exists, but you get my point. Also, I do like that there is no supporting pre-end of the game. It is literally the final choice you make in the entire game. So that's cool. But so now that I've mentioned motivating students, are you stuck with just the 8 students that you start the game with, depending on your house choice? No. If you find a particular student from another house interesting, like say you started with Black Eagles and you go Golden Deer next, but you really liked Petra, Dorothea, and Bernadetta, that is, you can recruit Dorothea, Petra, and Bernadetta. Easiest way, and the way I recommend doing that, by the way, is spending 800 renown each on them and getting their support ranks to B, and then they will just auto join you. Because your support rank is high enough. You know? Which is funny because the wiki actually lists support ranks, lists things for above B for support ranks. I find that weird because only no support in C really mean anything in terms of the stuff, because you could also just have the appropriate stat boosted. I think it's B in whatever skill they want, and then a certain threshold of that, which is why just getting them to B is just the easier thing, especially if you're going non-golden deer, well, non-black eagle, because we'll talk about my problems with Silver Snow later, but outside of Silver Snow, you can't recruit Hilda and the Black Eagles, and with the Black Eagles, and then there's a yawn attack because of course there is. God, and I'm gonna have to do a lot of reading later today too. Anyways, yeah. So you can basically recruit them with the faculty, which is basically the church members. You basically just either have to get to a certain point in the story, or you have to be at a certain level. For example, with Cyril, I think you need to be level 10. With Catherine, I think you need to be level 15. And obviously, you have to be far enough in the story, too. Hanneman and Manuela, I think, is just story progress. I could be wrong. Alois, I think, is just story progress. Yes, which is funny because in my final route, I actually forgot about Alois, which means I will not complete the sport log fully until I recruit Alois and get his supports up. Yeah. Anyways, but that's gonna be for a while because I got burnt out on this game, and it has everything to do with the narrative. The narrative was just again, we'll get there. So then, so then you can also help your students set goals for themselves, goals for what class they want to pursue. We'll talk about reclassing in a minute because it's actually my next note: certifications and reclassing. Being a professor effectively means you can tutor your students in different uh, skills that you want to build up if you want to put them in different classes. And just because they have weaknesses, which means it's going to take longer for them to level up in that particular skill, or rank up if you prefer, just because it's going to take them longer to rank up, not doesn't necessarily mean it's pointless to tutor them in that weakness. Let's take Dorothea as the best example of this. Okay? Dorothea has a weakness, a strength in reason, but a weakness in faith. Faith, of course, being your white magic. Pro tip for anybody who's actually planning to use Dorothea: keep focusing on her, keep instructing her in white magic. You don't have to set it as her goal, but you have to keep motivating her and tutoring her, because there are things called budding talents. Dorothea's budding talent in faith literally is like, okay, here's this new skill for you. Oh, and that budding talent, once she gets it, will then shift faith from being a weakness to a strength, which means leveling up faith will go faster. And now you see the point. Now, I don't think it does that for anybody else, if I'm honest. I think it's just Dorothea. But again, that is an example of don't sleep on anyone's skill, right? Just because Hubert, has a weakness in faith doesn't mean I didn't want him being able to heal other people, right? Sure, he's got a weakness in faith, but having somebody who can just heal a few extra points, that's not insubstantial. I mean, I even allowed Balthus to be to heal people, for God's sakes, even though he actually really sucks at it because his magic stat is so low, you know. Which now you're probably like, okay, so why would you tutor them? Because of the certification exams. All right, so let's talk about this. Before this point, Fire Emblem basically only ever had, well, since Awakening, they've only had lances, swords, lances, axes, bows, tomes, staves. Those are your 6 classifications. The classic one also split up tomes into anima and dark tomes. Okay, so 7 basically. Fire Emblem doesn't really have more than 7 classifications before this point. However, the classification exams change this up a little bit. I mentioned that there are abilities. Well, you unlock abilities when you level up specific things, because in this one there's more that they added. Yes, you have your swords, your swords, your lances, your axes, your bows, your tomes and staves, which are your which is, of course, like I said, reason and faith, respectfully. Okay, so the standard 6 are there. The ones they add are brawling, which is fist-related weapons, gauntlets, basically. Which also allows you to fight unarmed, by the way, in those particular classes. Horseback riding, flying, which, I mean, this is Fire Emblem, so Cavaliers and Pegasus Knights and Wyvern Riders. Okay. And then there's also heavy armor and authority for a total of 11. Now, heavy armor is pretty self-explanatory. Knight classes. We're with it. There's only really 2. Armor Knight, I think they call it Armor Knight and Fortress Knight, respectively. There's also Great Knight, which is considered a heavy armor class. So there's that. So yeah, and all of these require you to be at a specific threshold, which is funny because on my stream file, Claude was actually falling behind because I didn't want to just cheat out his, use the New Game Plus features to cheat out the thing. I eventually did start doing that with like authority in that, but that was just because I wanted to get on with it. Now you're probably thinking, well, what's authority? Well, admittedly, that is 5 notes down, but I guess we can talk about it now. You can hire battalions. Now, battalions are effectively act kind of like Materia did in FF7. They will adjust your stats by a specific amount. But what's added in is you actually have an extra ability that can't be countered. They're called gambits. So, and this is useful for when you fight monster battles, by the way, which is way down on my notes. But I, again, good segueing is good segueing. So, the battalions. So the battalions then can allow you to use their gambits, and the higher you get your authority rank, the better battalions that can accompany that unit. And some units, like for example Felix, work better without battalions or with their battalions completely having their endurance shrunk. You know, so it right. And this is brilliant because monsters have these. Okay, monsters take up multiple squares, and those squares have this. Basically, have this yellow layer on top of them, right? That is effectively their armor. So you have to break through it, and then it's like, oh god, so we have to do extra damage on top of the multiple health bars that you mentioned, Blue Wolf. No, 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 no. This is different. Well, yes, the monster will regenerate those shields if you leave any of them up. What you can do is you can just break all of them. Now, with some monsters, this gets a little ridiculous. Ridiculous. The immovable from the Paralog Legend of the Lake comes to mind immediately, and the Black Eagle boss end bosses, by the way. Maybe while we're on the subject. But if you can manage to break all of them, usually it's about 4. The average is just 4 of them. You break all 4 of those, they can't regenerate their shields. Their shields will never regenerate. Ever. Ever. And what happens when all the shields are gone? You can do more damage. Some shields are really aggravating. Again, see the Black Eagle end games for examples of that. I'm staying hush on that because I want you to understand this has no spoilers. I'm not going to talk about that too much. But yeah, no, it's you break them and you'll gain some resources for the blacksmith. I'll talk about the blacksmith in a minute. Then you can actually hit them for more damage, which means it's you're able to do more damage, uh, get more hits on them, and go from there, right? Which is actually a very nice concept. I love it. I've mentioned the blacksmith, so let's talk about the blacksmith. You can repair your weapons in this game. Now, or you can forge them to stronger weapons. Forging in Fates was, well, okay, let me put it to you this way. Forging in Awakening was too easy. Just go to the Golden Gaff, get a bunch of money, and you have 2 silver weapons. And if you manage to defeat all the enemies on the map, you have 2 fully powered silver weapons, right? Which is ridiculous. Fates tried to, like Fates does, tried to balance it, but ended up breaking it by making you made you grind out resources. And that's not fun, I'm sorry. Grinding out resources is boring in Fates. However, and on top of that, it's basically just they made forging too much busy work. In this one, you just need a specific material depending on what kind of weapon it is. If it's considered one of the killer weapons, because yes, killer weapons have an entire category. Well, I shouldn't say an entire category. They have a category to themselves. Specifically, Killing Edge and Wo Dao are the two. So these high crit weapons require black sand steel. Basic weapons just require um, the smithing stones. God, why did I blank on that? The Sword of the Creator, which we'll talk about in a bit, requires requires whatchamacallit. I think it's umbral steel. There's also Erigetlum, which I don't remember that what requires that. Specific weapons will. Mithril, which is required for some really powerful weapons, which, funny enough, you can actually find rusted versions of weapons, and that's how you tell how powerful it is. If it requires two smithing stones, that's an iron weapon. That's whatever. If it requires 5, that's probably going to be a silver one, but sometimes you can get like rare weapons. Now, I don't remember where you get it, but there's a specific rusted weapon I remember finding somewhere that requires 10 mithril to find out what it is. Which is nice. I actually like that idea because it actually gives you incentive to not sleep on, rusted weapons. Because if you find that, then you can just grind out the 10 mithril by doing, monsters on the monster battles, and then go from there. Now, it all depends on what type of monster you break all the shields of, admittedly, but again, sometimes that can be worth it. I don't remember which ones contain which ones. I think it's like the wolves or wood steel. I think umbral steel is like the specific demonic beast. I don't know it, and I didn't write it down because this is not a guide on how to max out everything in this game. Not really. So let's go ahead and talk about. Oh, there is one other thing I missed actually that I should have included during the monastery stuff. You can also invite 8 people to tea. The tea parties are kind of a nice touch. If you know the characters well enough, you can actually get some huge support points with them and increase your charm level, which helps with gambits and battalions. So there you go. So I've got a couple of complaints that I just want to go through. I've already talked about the paralogs, so that part's done. The monster fights, I've discussed those. Um, let's talk about load times and the dialogue options, or lack thereof, as my note puts it. Alright, so the load times got a little annoying. Admittedly, I don't know if that's just my Switch is starting to chug, or if it's something else. I did ultimately give it a negative, but and maybe I shouldn't have, but you know, maybe in a few years I'll re-review this game as part of like some big Fire Emblem marathon or something. And then we can adjust the score because then I will have a template that I can follow. I'll do an audit run and then I will, I'll edit my score, or which, by the way, that this score is only going to get the gameplay score is only going to go up if I do that. Now, specific ones I will never do because I will never touch them again. And see, Fire Emblem Warriors is a good example of that. But, yeah. One of these days. Like, for example, I'm intending to do that with Cold Steel 2, by the way, which is the only Trails game that I have done to date, and my phone went off. Jump cut in 3, 2, 1. It was right in front of me. Oh, something important, actually. That thing is getting annoyed. Sorry. Minor thing. I went to search my phone. Sorry for that. That's I might edit that out. I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, editing is actually why it's taken me so long to get these actually uploaded. Funny enough. Although once I do, excuse me, once I do, they'll all start going live. So where the hell was I? Right, load times. So yeah, I don't know, or no, dialogue options. That's where I was. So with dialogue options, there's so many times where you're basically just saying something that Byleth could just have on it in the text box there. There is no dialogue options in this game, and I feel like there should have been. This game almost just feels like it's begging to be done in the style of, of KOTOR or 1 and Mass Effect, Now, I know some people say that, the dialogue wheel is terrible. Oops, sorry. I know some people say that the dialogue wheel is terrible. I kind of disagree with that, admittedly. I'd only dislike it when it's not what I'm saying, right? Or not what my character would say, right? And honestly, I feel like, especially considering Byleth is a flat non-character, that could have actually have helped us to add some character to Byleth. Other than the lack of a character that they have, especially the male Byleth, but semantics. So yeah, like I said, I already mentioned the paralogs. Alright. So next up is my only other complaint in the entire game. Anna. Now, in Fire Emblem Awakening, the novelty of recruiting Anna was actually kind of neat. And it was for 3 basic reasons. 1, she had some support conversations, which were actually fun to go through. 2, she came to you in a very good. She was actually a very well, she was a good unit. She was an actually good unit, which I know isn't saying anything in Fire Emblem Awakening, not really, but she was still a good unit. She knew she had. You didn't have to put much work into her for her to be a viable member of the team, especially if you recruited her ASAP. Which I still say the spot in which she unlock where her paralog unlocks, her recruitment paralog specifically unlocks, is a little on the bad timing side, because that's chapter 10, renewal. And those that have played Fire Emblem Awakening or have seen my 3.5-hour video on Fire Emblem Awakening know why I say that. Yeah. Anyways. Also, her quest, because yes, there's quests in this game, her quest sucks. It's called a peculiar trend, and what is it? Basically, you just go get loot drops from a bunch of random enemies in battle, in the battle mode, in the random battles. That's it. That's all. Now, credit where it's due, you can get them from paralogs, and you can get them from, uh, from rando battles, quest battles specifically. Also, if you sit there on normal mode and just grind them out, you can actually have it be where you can literally have Peculiar Trend just be done the second Anna hands it to you, like 5 or 6 times, as I did. It actually got funny, but at the same time, that's why it's a negative. I gave it a negative just because I just don't like it. And Anna also got a negative, both a gameplay negative and a story negative, just because she doesn't fit. She doesn't have any supports. She's not even that great of a unit, in my opinion. And her paralog is absolutely terrible. Gameplay negative. Which is funny, because I gave her paralog 2 gameplay negatives, funny enough. I guess I've mentioned bad questing, so let's briefly skip ahead to the time skip now, because there's also another quest that sucks in the time skip called So the supply run. It's a fetch quest. Go get these specific. Go get these specific things that, I mean, if you have to basically know what you're doing with it. I admit that's related to a note called I think called info in game. There's a lot of good info in this game. There is some bad info, so I don't remember if I gave it simultaneously gave it a plus and a negative, but yeah, it was not that good. It's not that great, and it's only for specific things. That's why I don't give a walkthrough itis negative for it. When it's only two things that can be easily skipped, it's like two minor things. So let me stress that two minor things that can be easily skipped. Well, yeah, no, I'm not willing to. I'm not willing to. Uh, I'm not really willing to ding the game for it. The only other two things three, excuse me. The only other three notes that aren't really that don't potentially bleed over into story or in my notes, would end up being are my comments on the music. My commentary on the music, the difficulty curve, and the support grind. Okay. Whoops. Yeah. Let's get the music out of the way. I like the music of this game. I really do. The music direction, I gave a wash to that, but I will not try to argue down lore if he gives a gameplay negative, or story negative, or however the hell he does that for the music. Now I put it in specifically gameplay because it enhances my enjoyment of the gameplay. And that's kind of why I've given a music direction plus to story, right? Because again, the music is great in gameplay, and that's why I wanted to give that. I also like the difficulty and power progression curve in this game. Now, unless you're going the paralogs, which is funny because I said that in Awakening as well. Unless you're going for the paralogs, I find the difficulty curve is very, very smooth and very nice, and your power progression curve, as long as you're not slacking on it, is actually very smooth as well. Oh, right. So, kudos there. There is one last thing I do need to. There is one last thing, although it is a good segue into my more story-related gameplay notes. So let's talk about a note that I skipped. Well, kind of skipped. Let's talk about the adjutant system. I adore the adjutant system. This got 3 positives from me. Now, why? Well, my note says it all. Adjutants, aka pair up balanced properly. Now, why do I say that? Well, see, pair up was first introduced in Awakening, and it was god tier broken. There's no hand waving this. Okay, in Fire Emblem Awakening, you paired up 2 units, and they would gain stab. The lead person would gain stab boost based upon who they're paired with, what their support rank with that character was, so on and so forth. And they could, that paired up partner could also attack. It had a chance to attack, which was really high if it was the S support, and a chance to defend, which was also decently high if it was an S support, which basically meant it was a broken mechanic. Fates tried to balance it, because what Fates tried to do was it was 3 specific nerfs. First and foremost, make you choose between dual strike and dual guard. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Dual guard is based more on a meter / whether or not you're receiving a dual strike or not. Though the dual strike one doesn't drain the shield meter, and the shield meter is just a free guaranteed guard, which then the enemy can and will exploit every goddamn time. So, it'll block one attack. Okay. I mean, alright. Alright, I'm kind of with it. So that simultaneously also nerfs dual strike because you can't dual strike a paired up unit. Okay, I'm with it. I'm with it. They cut the damage of the dual strike in half. Really? Really? You did that? Really? You did that? You did all three? That's the thing. That's the thing that pisses me off. That's the thing that pisses me off the most. Because any one of those nerfs, even a combination of two of those nerfs, right? The whole, uh, the whole shield meter thing, and I'm blocking dual strike by itself would have been fine if you just made us choose and then made it so that paired up units can do that, because they do throw paired up units at you. Here's the problem. They crippled it. All three of those combined just crippled it, because the choice enough was enough to help bring the power strength of pair up down, and you brought it down even further with that. But the problem is when you nerf dual strike, it's like, well, then what the hell's the point? It's just a little bit of bonus damage, which is funny because if you contrast that with the adjutant system, the adjutant system is the same thing, except you pick. Oh yeah, and that was the other thing too. You had pair up required both units to be active members of the battle party. Awakening was broken, and was broken to the point where it was god tier level broken. Fates, I'm sorry, Fates fans, but Fates' pair up was shit tier levels of broken. In other words, it was broken to the point of being unusable. That was weird. It was broken to the point of being unusable. Usable. Now, what makes Oh yeah, and by the way, in Awakening, paired up units would, the support unit would only gain support if they attacked. If they attacked, which means clerics or people with no active, no weapons in their inventory, because they were all broken out of their inventory, or would not gain points. In Fates, the paired up unit will gain like a couple of X, a little bit of X when they block, which means they will fall behind fast if they are a support unit, unless you're constantly switching to them constantly. I was not, for the record. Yeah. I should probably also make sure that my thing is still good. Give me a second. Yep, and it even has a time frame left. Excellent. Time frame for what's left. Okay, good. Okay, sorry about that. So, then we have it, so how does the adjutant system work and fix this? Well, first of all, you have to pick between the three types, which is based on class. Okay, so there's attack, guard, and heal. And they're all pretty self-explanatory. Very rarely, these go off rarely, by the way. The heal one actually goes off more often. I don't know what determines it. If Future Alex wants to go ahead and put up the what determines it up on screen, he will do so. Oh, but it doesn't really matter, because the point is you're not going to factor adjutant into your planning, right? Because it's basically we'll get into it with my biggest reason why this was 3 positives, by the way. So you have to choose, so that's already balanced. It's very rare that the follow-up will mean anything. Because the stats are also brought down. Well, wait, Blue Wolf, I thought you said multiples would be terrible. Yes, but I also said that nerfing, the nerfing that they did in Fates was all bad. Except for there's one thing that actually bolsters it and makes it all those points actually work. Because again, you're not doing so for the dual strike capacity. They nerfed dual strike even though you have to pick between dual guard and dual strike. So the way they balanced it here was you're not going to really think about it, right? So when they dual strike, their stats are brought down, which okay, whatever. However, dual guard also then cuts damage down, which is always good. So it's not just a straight occasionally you take no damage. It's occasionally the damage is reduced, which is very nice. And then heal, of course, is heal HP, which is brilliant. The adjutants are not counted amongst the active battle party. So if you have 10, you can basically it's like I think at one point it's like 11 max fighters and 3 adjutants. And here's the best part, and this is what cemented the three positives for me. The adjutants gain exp on everything. Even if the person they're an adjutant for uses white magic on an allied unit, adjutant still gains exp. Think about that for a second. Now, granted, it is dependent on their level, but this is a catch-up mechanic. This is meant to be a catch-up mechanic to catch the units that, let's say, you have at level 3 and you want to get them to level 5. You can pair them with a level 12 unit, and they will eventually catch up in levels pretty easily. At absolute most, if the adjutant will catch up after like 3 level ups of the level 12. So it'll be like they're at level 10 and the adjutant is at level 15. You see how this works? You see how brilliant this idea is? This cuts down on the frickin' level grinding substantially. Because then, even if you want to do a solo mode, so the one person gains all the exp, you can have an adjutant, so you're leveling effectively 2 people at the same time. That's great stuff. I love it. It's brilliant. Oh, and the adjutants are also gaining weapon experience while we're on the subject. Think about that for a second. Think about it. They're gaining weapon exp, so they're gaining skill exp. They're gaining physical exp. Oh, and if they're equipped with a battalion, they will be gaining 2 skill. They will be filling 2 bars of skill exp. One of them will be authority, obviously. And if they are either a cavalier or a flying unit, then that's a 3rd one, depending on which one they are. Or if they're a heavy armor class. You see why this is brilliant? I have actually gained weapon ranks with the adjutant system. It's a great system and I freaking love it. Now let's talk about the Sword of the Creator, shall we? But Blue Wolf, I thought you weren't going to talk about the story. I'm not. The Sword of the Creator is something we got to talk about in gameplay. As I said, Umbral Steel to repair it. Okay, you can't really upgrade it because it upgrades in the story. Okay, I'm with it. The Sword of the Creator is very interesting because it's one of the weapons that comes with a weapon-exclusive combat art. And I like that. And I like that idea. The Sword of the Creator is also the only weapon that can actually recharge its usages, even if it's broken, by resting during the calendar portion. So if you select rest or if you skip to a date, then the Sword of the Creator will restore 5 of its uses. That's great stuff. I love that. Skip an entire month and the Sword of the Creator is back up to its full 20. Now, granted, it usually is just better to just go to the blacksmith and recharge the Sword of the Creator. But since you don't really have access, I think it's like a chapter or 2 after you get the Sword of the Creator that the blacksmith finally unlocks. Yeah, Oh, I didn't mention the support grind. So support grinding has a lot of ways to mitigate it. Adjutants, adjutants share a meal. Um, the training, like I said, and the tutoring, like I said. Um, I still find that there's a bit of a support grind, mostly because you can miss supports, which means then you have to wait until the next playthrough in order to get it, which is. By the way, I also simultaneously gave New Game Plus a plus and a negative, and I forgot to write that down because I am SMRT smart like that. Yeah, it looks like I didn't write it down in any of my notes. But yeah, so New Game Plus is basically just gain renown based on your difficulty level, the mode you're in, blah, 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 blah. So basically, play this on Classic. Don't play this on Casual. Unless you don't care. Unless you don't care about the New Game Plus features, which, to be honest with you, I think you should, because the New Game Plus options are brilliant, and I love it. And I mean, every character, every skill requires like I think it's like 5,500 to max out from E with renowned. Honestly, I would allow the player to choose uh, the the what carries over, specifically if it's the levels, the support ranks, blah 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 blah. And then offer the renown as a secondary option if you want to just get it to a specific point where you want to cheat it out or whatever. Ever after the fact. Options. So, I guess we can also. Oh, there's there's also my note about Thieves at the Throat, which is a DLC quest that you get in the time skip. It's not good. It's basically go deal with a whole lot of Wyvern Riders, and oh god, that map can just go burn. Or that battle rather can just go burn. Not the map itself, but that mission can just go burn. So let's talk about why I prefer the Battle of the Eagle and Lion to the War at Gronder. War at Gronder is dumb. It has too many nasty it has too many bad story implications in my opinion, and it has too much really stupid crap, not the least of which being the demonic beasts is that the one faction uses against you. So yeah, that just doesn't work for me. I prefer the Battle of the Eagle and Lion because I felt it was much more fair than its time skip counterparts. So, oh, and if you go Black Eagles, you never participate in that battle. Slash, it doesn't happen. Even though I would argue the cutscene in question actually makes a lot of sense for it, but whatever. Uh, Before I get to talking about why I hate the end games for the most part, alright, let's talk about this DLC, Cindered Shadows, and its gameplay changes. First and foremost, it's not a part of the main game. We'll talk about that more when we get into White Clouds, but which I may or may not shift over to talking about now, but we'll see. The changes I like mostly because they bring back down your overall power in order to because of the limitations, right? For example, you basically only get uh 7 outside of the Ashen Wolves, which are the DLC characters. You only get 7 of the students, or no, 6 of the students plus Byleth, right? So yeah, that actually works. Works in my opinion. It actually is. Oh, excuse me. It actually works for what it is. Because it's actually kind of cool. And a lot of the characters actually do make a lot of sense. which is hilarious to me because the support covers there's actually good gameplay reasons and even some story reasons. Happy, for example, can support with both Lindhart and Ash, who are there. Um, Yuri can Constance supports with Edelgard. I mean, granted, and then Balthus has a history with Hilda, so yeah, it all fits. Also, I do like that each map rewards you with smithing materials, so you can just go to the blacksmith in Abyss and uh, do that. Uh, so let's talk about well, there's two more things I want to talk about, which takes up 4 notes, but whatever. The end games of the Black Eagle routes, Azure Moon, and Verdant Wind. The only one I liked was Verdant Winds, and that's just because it was a unique weaken the foe, make progress kind of map. The problem with the other ones is reinforcements and multiple health bar final bosses, which is just ugh, right. Give me something interesting to do. By the way, this is how you use the Dead Lord's concept. By the way, properly. By the way, Hey Awakening. Just saying, is Verdant Wind's endgame. But yeah, no, the Black Eagle ones are slogs and are, in my opinion, frankly idiotic. The Azure Moon one is irritating because of the boss having a long ranged attack. Heck, that she can that they can use that she can use twice per turn, which is just and yeah. Also, I also don't like the lack of unit exclusive characters. There is effectively only 2 characters that are well, no, 2. I'm right. I'm right. There's only 2 route exclusive characters in the entire game. There's your Ritza, who's a DLC character in Crimson Flower, and then there's Gilbert in Azure Moon. And Gilbert is just a story negative. I'll just be honest about that. Because I honestly wish we had gotten, Judith and Adair. I'll name drop them, but I'm not going to explain any further. I wish we had gotten Judith and Adair as exclusive units in Verdant Wind. I wish there had been some exclusive units in Silver Snow. I wish we had gotten. I wish we had also gotten Rodrigue in Azure Moon, because that just would have worked. I know the problems with Rodrigue. Don't at me, but at the same time, ugh. Anyways, so that's it for gameplay. That's all I've got. But the gameplay surprisingly had a decent chunk of stuff to go through. I mean, I've been sitting here for an hour and 10 minutes talking about this. So yeah, the end games aside, I still do enjoy the gameplay of Three Houses, and I do recommend you play this game. So, from here on out, we're in full spoiler mode. So, how this is going to work is I encourage you to watch part 2, which is White Clouds, and then part 2 will have a whole lot of I'll link part 2 in the description of this one. So part 2 will be White Clouds, all of my discussion with White Clouds, which, funny enough, will probably be the longest segment because most of this page, all of that page, the entirety of this page, and then the top of that page. So yeah, I've got a lot to discuss just when it comes to White Clouds. Which is funny because that is legit the bulk of the game, isn't it? But regardless, regardless, even if you don't watch any of the other parts, I hope you have enjoyed my thoughts on the gameplay of Fire Emblem Three Houses, and I will talk to you guys in the next part, where we will start discussing the narrative. May God have mercy on my soul. May Sothis have mercy on my soul, because the narrative of Three Houses will not. See you in part 2, guys. Little Alex the Lore Walkers signing out. Have a good one.